Welcome to Learn Jazz Drums. Today I'm going to talk about how not to get lost when you're playing a jazz drum solo. So this is a follow-up to last week's lesson where I talked about how not to get lost playing jazz in general. And if you haven't seen that video and it's something you're interested in, you can see that linked up here or in the description below. But for today, I'm going to specifically talk about how not to get lost when you're playing a drum solo. So as I talked about last week, it's really important to know the overall form, the sections, the melody, and even the lyrics of any song you're going to play. And so most standards have lyrics, but quite a bit of instrumental standards don't have lyrics. So in that case, there's no lyrics to learn, but the majority of them do have lyrics, so learn them. Drum solos are a lot different in jazz than other styles because you're playing over the entire form. As we know in jazz, you usually play the melody, then you play some solos over that same form, and then you play the melody again. And drum solos are no different. If it's a 36 bar form, you're going to play a form on your solo that's 36 bars long. You might take one or two or three choruses, but it's going to follow that exact form. And for some drummers, this can be really scary and stressful because usually drum solos are last, and you have to keep the form perfectly and not get lost and then lead the band back into the melody. And if you get lost and you don't know where you are, there's not much you can do other than just counting the band back in. And then everyone knows that you messed up the form. So how do we not get lost? 32 bars is a lot of room for error. So how are we supposed to keep track of that? Step one is to know the form. So if you know the form and you know that it's not just 32 bars, it's actually AABA, each section is 8 bars, and you can divide it up like that in your head, that's going to be infinitely helpful. If you're playing a gig and they call a song that you didn't know, then go home and learn it. Write it down and learn it later. Make sure that you learned the form and the lyrics so that next time you play with those people or with other people who happen to play that same song, then you know it. Additionally, if you're on a gig and you already knew a song, but for some reason you got lost, that's probably a sign that you need to review it. So just go home, write it down again, and then learn that song. Make sure you know it inside and out. Step two is to clearly mark the sections. So if you're first starting out playing jazz, don't be afraid to mark every 8 bars. Mark out the sections. Just focus on those 8 bars at a time and get through the form. So maybe play a big beat 1 every 8 bars. It's also helpful to just note which section you're at in your head. So if you play 8 bars, just make sure in your head you know that was the first 8 bars, and now I have another A to play if it's an AABA form. So let's say this is a 16 bar form. Every 4 bars is a different section, and it's AABA. So for the A's, I'm going to clearly mark those by hitting one of these. I'm going to hit that on beat 1, and then on beat 1 of the bridge section, I'll hit a bass drum. Right on beat 1, so you know exactly where I am, and that's going to help me keep track because I know it's 1, 2, 1, 1, and then we're at the top. 1, 2, I want 2, 3, 4. So that's really obvious and that's really locked in. But if you're a beginner, that's what you got to do. And it's really helpful because I knew exactly where I was in that form. And then if you're more advanced, maybe you want to disguise that a little bit. But you want to keep everyone knowing where you are in the form. So maybe you play more like this. And we're going to follow the same form. AABA, each section is 4 bars and it's a total of 16 bars. 1, 2, I want 2, 3. So you can see I wasn't leaving the same amount of space to clearly go, here we are, beat 1, this is the A section, like I was before when I was demonstrating what it's like for a beginner. But still, all of this can apply and be very helpful just for marking those sections. So keep in mind that even as an advanced player, you're going to have to play so that the band can understand what's happening. That's the most important part. You're playing with people and you're playing a drum solo and you're following the form and they want to know exactly where you are. So if you're playing non-stop, a bunch of over the bar line stuff, and they get lost, it's kind of your fault. So all that to say, if you're a beginner, clearly mark out those sections. It's going to help you and it's going to help the band know exactly where you are, and make sure you're noting which section you are in your head. And then as you get more and more advanced, you don't have to be as obvious about it, but you do still want to be clear about where you are in the form so that everyone knows where you are. All right, step number 3 is to reference the melody. So if you're first starting out, try referencing the melody very clearly at the beginning of each section that it happens. So maybe I'll take the song All of Me, and I'll take the part of the melody that goes, all of me, why not take all of me? And I'll play that much of it both times that it occurs. So All of Me is a 32 bar form. It's A, B, A, C. So at the beginning of each of those A sections, I'm going to play the melody very clearly so that you know exactly where I am. 1, 2, I want 2, 3, 4. So see what I did there? I gave a very clear indication on the second half. This is where the melody is. So you know exactly where I am. All of me, why not take all of me? And then I play the rest of my solo. So if you're a beginner, referencing the melody that clearly can be really helpful and really help you know where you are and help the band know exactly where you are. And even if you think you know where you are, it might help you just to physically play it. It's kind of the same way that other people say writing down helps you remember stuff more than just listening to it or reading it. Actually, physically writing it down is the same way. So if you're a beginner, physically playing it might help you just further cement, this is exactly where I am in the form. Again, if you're more advanced, this might be a little bit of overkill. The way I played it is probably a little too much, but always keep in mind, you gotta help the band know exactly where you are during your solo. That's your responsibility. No matter how awesome what you play is, if they lose their spot, then that's kind of on you, and you need to play clearly so that they understand what's going on. If you're a more advanced player, referencing the melody can just be really helpful in your solo. So just don't do it in such an obvious way like I was demonstrating before. Maybe do it more like this, in a more musical fashion. 1, 2, I want 2, 3. So you saw in the second half of that, I was kind of going with this motif of just the dotted quarter kind of representing the melody. The all of me, da 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 da, da 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 da. And I think the band would clearly pick up on that, but it's not like super obvious. It's not like, hey guys, this is where it is. It's like, hey guys, I'm playing all of me, and I'm referencing the melody, but I'm also improvising around it. All right, so now step 4 is to play the hi-hat on 2 and 4. So as a beginner, do this all the time. Play the hi-hat on 2 and 4 no matter what throughout your entire solo. This is going to help your time be locked in, help you stay on the form, and help the band know exactly where you are no matter what you play. More than likely, if you're a beginner, you're going to play something that wasn't exactly what you intended. But if your hi-hat is still going on 2 and 4, the time is solid, and everyone knows maybe you didn't mean to play that exactly how you played it, but the time keeps going and they know exactly where you are. So even if my solo gets wonky or crazy or kind of out of time, I know that the hi-hat is solid and the band can track that. So for example, I'll play 16 bars of a drum solo that gets all out of whack and crazy and isn't very good, and it's only going to be 16 bars long, and then I'm going to land on beat 1 at the end of the 16 bars, but I'm not going to play the hi-hat. So see if you can trace this. 1, 2, I want 2, 3, 4. Any luck? Probably not. So now I'll do the same kind of drum solo, but I'll keep the hi-hat going on 2 and 4 and see if you can keep track of where it is. 1, 2, I want 2, 3, 4. Just as is the case with all of the other tips in this lesson, if you're more advanced, it might not make sense to keep the hi-hat going the entire time during your solo, but it's very helpful and for the most part most drummers like to do it throughout their solo. Maybe they don't do it 100% of the time, but it's something they can do all the time and then they choose not to. So it's a skill to develop no matter how advanced you are. Here's an example of a more advanced drum solo at that same tempo, but I'll keep the hi-hat on 2 and 4, and it's not going to be all messy like the one before. 2, 2, 3, 4. So I kept the 2 and 4 going on the hi-hat the whole time. So hopefully the band would have understood everything I played, even if I didn't play the hi-hat on 2 and 4, but it helped me and it helps the band out to have the 2 and 4 going on the hi-hat. And now we move on to step 5, the final step, which is clarity. Clarity is super important at all levels on the drums. So if your ideas aren't clear, the band is going to get lost and then you'll get lost as well. So you need to make sure that the ideas that you go to play come out clear and they come out as you intended. Now keep in mind, cleanliness is different than clarity. So in my opinion, some of the best drummers out there didn't necessarily play clean, but they played very clear. For example, here's something that's clear and clean. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Nothing particularly good or bad about that, essentially, but here's an example of playing something maybe a little more dirty, but it's also clear. 1, 2, 3, 4. See how it was just a little bit different? It wasn't so crisp and clean, but it was very clear at the same time. So both of these can be great. I like playing solos sometimes that are super clean, and sometimes I like playing solos that are super dirty, or maybe I mix it up and play somewhere in the middle or whatnot. But my point is that clarity is different than cleanliness. So don't think that I'm saying you have to play clean all the time. I'm just saying that whatever you play, make sure it's very clear so that you and everyone else understands it. You'll get better at simultaneously improvising and knowing exactly where you are and connecting the limbs to your brain so that whatever you think of playing or whatever comes out of you actually comes out in your hands as well. So that's my 5 steps for not getting lost during a drum solo. So first is the big one, which is know the form. And it goes the same with helping play the song, but then you just keep the form in mind as you're actually playing a drum solo over that same form. Then, if you're a beginner or even if you're advanced, you can clearly mark the sections to help you out and help you keep track of where exactly you are. Maybe you hit a big crash on the bridge so that you clearly mark to yourself, this is where the bridge is, and everyone else in the band knows as well. And then you can reference the melody to help the band out and help you so that you play the actual melody physically on the drums and you remember this is exactly where I am, and the band can also latch onto that as well. Playing the hi-hat on 2 and 4 and playing with a lot of clarity is going to ensure that you and everyone else in the band also knows where you are and you don't get lost during your drum solo. So if you're a beginner, make sure to consciously think about the form so you know exactly where you are, reference the melody, maybe mark out the sections if you need to, and if your ideas have to be very simple as a result, that's okay because you know exactly where you are. And if you're trying to play something more difficult and you get lost, then you shouldn't really be doing it. You should only be doing that once you get to the point where you're comfortable enough to know where you are and play these more complex ideas. And as an advanced player, you're probably not going to have the issue of getting lost during your drum solo, but it's important to keep in mind that you can use all of these different techniques to help the band know exactly where you are. So maybe you keep the hi-hat going the whole solo, or maybe you play a bunch of other stuff and then you reference the melody very clearly so they know exactly where you are in the form just in case. They probably were already with you, but it's always helpful to just give them reassurance that this is where I am, we're all together, this is great. So I hope this, along with the previous video, help you on your journey of not getting lost as a jazz drummer. It's a vital skill to have and it's well worth your time to work on this stuff. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a like or a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. And make sure you're also subscribed to this Learn Jazz Drums YouTube channel because I come out with a free brand new video lesson every single week. And thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.